Hi, my name is Azra. The topic of my today's vlog is planning to Scrum meeting. Now, of all Scrum meetings, it seems to me that planning to, for some reason, is the one that is most often misused and misunderstood. In the last 6 years of me working as a Scrum Master for numerous software development teams, I have met only 2 teams that have used planning to session as it was meant to be done. Now, this topic has recently caught my attention as I started supporting yet another new development team that is misusing this planning to session. And I was wondering if I can figure out the reason why that is. Now, here are some variations of the planning to sessions that I have experienced. So, a planning to session where the development team sits down together and assigns stories to each developer, and that ends the meeting. Another variation would be the development team sits together, assigns the stories, and then asks out loud in the room, are there any questions? If there are some questions, then the answer is delivered very fast and almost in a very rushed manner, as if to say, let's just finish this as soon as possible. Or if there are no questions, then you end the meeting right there and then. Another thing I've experienced is that the development team sits together, and then for the story 1, they create a task called implement solution. They open a story 2, create a task, implement solution, and open the story 3 and create a task, take a guess, implement solution. And that ends the meeting. Another version that I've seen is that the team gets together. During the planning 1, they already assign stories, and then they say, planning 2 is basically obsolete, all the work is done, we don't need the meeting at all, and that ends it. And my last favorite is that the development team has a sprint change day that is very long. So their day starts sometime at 9 in the morning, they have a review with the customer, and then from 10 to 12 there's a retrospective, and then after lunch around 1 to 2:30 is the planning 1. And then planning 2 is planned around 3:30 to 5:30. And by this time, half of the team has already gone home because of half of them are early risers. And then you only have half a team to do the planning 2 with, and this is what they also realize themselves, which makes them basically just say, okay, let's skip the planning 2 altogether if it's not necessary, and they just continue or start working on the new sprint. So basically, the conclusion from the above is that most time put aside for planning 2 meetings is either not used at all or not used properly. Now, why is that? Is it that it is not needed in most teams, or that it takes place that late in the day that just not fits most of the people, and that why it is skipped? Or is it that its purpose is simply misunderstood? Some months ago, I explained extensively to my 2 teams the purpose of the planning 2 and invited them to use this in their next planning 2 session, but that didn't make much difference. And it really was not only until I visited them in person and practiced the planning 1 and 2 on one other example that the penny dropped for most developers. I'll share with you the exercise that I did. Basically, I asked them to create a new product. And the product they created was pizza delivery website. So our exercise looked something like this. I asked them to collaboratively create all of the steps on the customer journey, all of the steps that a customer would have to go through from the start to finish in order to use their product, which is this pizza delivery website. So they came up with steps like, well, the customer would have to first log in and select a pizza, pay for it, and have a delivery option. We kept it very simple. So then I asked them to, below each of these steps, that they break these steps further down, so that the login step would be broken down into, for example, login using username and password, or login with Google. And we did that with every other steps, broken them down. Basically, the one that were broken down here, they are user stories, and the one that are horizontally listed as customer journey steps are the epics. Right, so with lots of laughter and fun, we created this. And then the next step was, I put the team into 2 groups and asked each group to take 3 to 4 user stories, and then to break them down further into tasks, paying attention that each task should not take longer than 1 day to complete. So that, for example, user story, login with entering username and password, that is this first one here. So that user story could break down into tasks such as these 3 listed here. For example, create the login possibility in the backend, create 2 fields, username and password, in the front end, and ensure that the database access is granted and that the logged in user could be checked. Now, disclaimer, I'm not a developer and these may not be accurate tasks, but I'm just using them to explain the point here. So it took the team of 12 developers about 1.5 hours to complete this task, which is exactly the amount of time that the planning 2 is planned for a 2-week sprint. And after everything was done, I hung all of the user stories and the corresponding tasks on the task board and said, exactly this is supposed to happen during the planning 2 session. And that was the aha moment for most of the developers, were saying, all right, okay, that's what we need to do with our real product. So let us look again at the purpose of the planning 2. Right. The purpose is that the implementation team must figure out how to solve the problem it took on planning 1. And this process has 2 parts. First part, they need to deliver some kind of solution concept. And that means a drawing or design or something to explain how the problem is to be solved. And the second thing that has to happen is a list of tasks. So what steps must the team do to get each selected backlog item to the state done? So literally the team has to sit either all together and brainstorm every single story all together, or separate themselves into groups of 2 or 3 and each take 2 or 3 user stories, and then together again brainstorm and break them down into smaller tasks. And always paying attention that these tasks should not take longer than 1 day, because otherwise you will have a bottlenecks on your task board once they start working on them during the sprint. The reason basically is that after planning 2 is finished, every single developer can just start working on their story. They don't need to think about they don't need to sit alone and brainstorm. That's the whole point. And the whole point of working in Scrum is to work collaboratively, communicating with each other, helping each other, so that you come up to solution more effectively, more quickly, and easier, basically, than what you would do if you were working alone. That goes to show that you can implement Scrum practices, but the switch of the mindset is something that takes time to really understand and to internalize the purpose of all Scrum events, of all Scrum practices and principles, and then really to put them into work, into your everyday work. I hope you liked this, and I hope it was helpful to most of you. Take care. See you next time.